0. First presentation, TK through 12 History Social Science, TK through 12 Science, and 6 to 12 World Language Adaptation Committee recommendations. Dr. Patel.
Thank you, Trustee Oshinsky. I'm going to go ahead and set up my screen. Please give me a thumbs up if it looks correct. Excellent. Good evening, board and community. I'm Sonal Patel, your Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and I'd like to present the TK-12 Adoption Committee's recommendations. Our adoption focus this fall centered on history social science for the grade bands TK5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, including specialized courses and programs. It also focused on science in TK5, 6, 8, 9, 12, and world language 6, 8, 9, 12. So you can see that with the various grade bands and adding in specialized courses, it was quite a large adoption focus in a very short amount of time. But we had a big need in San Leandro Unified School District. Our curriculum in history, social science, world language, and science was outdated and not aligned to current standards, frameworks, and our own internal vision as reflected in our strategic plans, and most importantly, our graduate profile. We had been waiting for funding for many years, and it was not coming. Luckily, a solution arose, a silver lining during this very difficult time. We were able to target special one-time COVID-19 emergency funding from the state to update our aging textbooks and learning materials in order to provide online access and relevant coursework for our students. Working under a highly compressed timeline, our heroic adoption committee members and facilitators worked in August before school even began to develop rubrics to cohere an SLUSD vision for how they wanted to select which publishing company materials they even wanted to pilot and review, and how they would embark on that evaluation. Different rubrics were developed in the different content areas, history, social science, science and world language, and even sub-rubrics for specific courses, an AP course, for example, as opposed to a course that maybe was designed specifically like Spanish for Spanish speakers. So these programmatic nuances were captured by the team so that when they went in to look at materials, they were not swayed by vendors' tricks or their schemes in how they present their materials, but instead approached the work with a very solid foundation rooted in what was best for our students and what aligned with quality teaching and learning. In September, they used this lens to begin to pilot lessons and review all the ancillary materials, including the digital platforms. And then they synthesized feedback that they sort of collated together as a team, including efforts made by many of the teachers to get student feedback and community feedback from our website or through their courses. I would like to point out that during this time, these our teachers and our support staff were also just launching distance learning. You can think about what teachers were doing in middle of August and September, right? Learning Seesaw, learning Schoology, figuring out the blended learning platforms. The folks on the adoption committee not only were doing that, but they were also getting multiple more licenses for all these various digital tools and managing all that on a very strict timeline in order to give it a very rigorous and thoughtful review. And as promised, here we are in October, and the committee has collated all their findings, their evaluations to form recommendations that are before you tonight. They're available online on the agenda in the briefs. There are multiple links inside that show the process, including the rubrics that were used. And you can also see in the briefs the feedback from the community. So wow, we did it, right? That is an awful lot of work in a short amount of time, and driven by the need and the quest for putting the best materials in front of our students and our teachers and support staff, our educators did it. So we just want to give them a big thank you and remind everyone that they were not only just navigating distance learning and coping with the pandemic themselves, but that they also found a way to really engage deeply in this adoption process. And the recommendations before you are well thought out, well evidenced, and extremely sound. I can say that they were able to do this in a compressed timeline because of the longstanding history of professionalism and expertise that's been cultivated among our teacher workforce, starting off with initiatives that you all have supported on the board, like IMSS or SPIFFy or ESP in science, sending our social studies teachers to conferences on learning the California framework, their own internal collaboration, presentations from history and social science teachers like Ms. Solberg at our board curriculum committee, showing us the outdated and often racist materials that were found in their core textbooks, to our world language teachers who've worked alongside Berkeley World Language Project and reviewed their materials continually. Our teachers already had an understanding of what they needed to do, so the compressed timeline did not at all stop them. So big shout out to them, and we'll show you their names in a bit. For science, using a rubric based on alignment with NGSS standards, and all rubrics for all content areas also included look at diversity, inclusivity, accessibility, engagement, content presentation, technology, the ability of the curriculum to foster critical thinking and rigor, and the type of assessment that is grounded, both formative and summative within the curriculum, were all factors that went into the science rubric. And the evidence of what emerged under each adoption is available in the brief. And what the committee chose, drum roll please, for TK5 and 6-8, the committee chose to recommend Amplify to the board for adoption, and Savas for 9-12. Big thank you to the TK5 Science Adoption Committee. Here are their names right here. And it includes one of our program coordinators, Yvonne Meyer, and our principals. Here are our 6-8 Adoption Committee members representing grades 6 through 8, and our 2 middle schools, including principal and vice principal from Muir and Bancroft. And here are our 9 to 12 Science Adoption Committee members, representation from Lincoln and San Leandro High School across the diverse programming that we have in our science department, proudly so. And one of our principals from the high school as well. Thank you so much. For history, social science, they developed a rubric similarly founded on the California standards for history, social science, but also the California framework, which includes other principles that the committee needed to attend to, including looking to make sure that there were materials that aligned to the FAIR Act and other legislation that shows progress in ensuring that our history materials include representation from underrepresented folks. And again, they still used the rubric, the other parts of the rubric that the science group used that touches on engagement, critical thinking, content presentation, technology, assessment, accessibility, and so forth. And the adoption committee chose for grades 6 through 8, Teachers Curriculum Initiative, often called TCI. And for grades 9 to 12, the committee is recommending for adoption National Geographic, called Nat Geo, through Cengage Company. And here are the committee members for history and social science, representing Muir, Bancroft, Lincoln, and San Leandro High School, and our various programming. We thank them for their work. For TK5, our history social science recommendation needs a little bit of background. The committee looked at the publishing companies and the adoptions that were put forth by the California State Board of Education, and they didn't meet the rubric that was developed. Honestly, the rubric that was developed by using the actual framework and standards alongside what we know to be historically responsive instruction. And so they did take one of the adoptions out for a spin, TCI, the ones that the 6th through 8th grade decided to adopt. But TCI, although it is one company, they have different authors and different stances in different parts of their curriculum. And so the rigor and the quality that we saw with TCI in grades 6 through 8 did not match in TK through 5. It was very generalized. The curriculum and the topics that they chose to give life to the standards, we felt did not represent the kind of social studies and social science teaching and learning that we wanted to put forth. And so the committee for TK5 decided something very brave. The teachers decided that they wanted to make their own custom-made units that were more closely aligned and rooted to the history social science framework, and also rooted to frameworks for historically responsive teaching, social justice frameworks, and also frameworks for really promoting inquiry-based learning that grounds students in their local community. So their units start with essential questions that are rooted in the history social science framework. They touch upon the history social science standards for TK through 5 and the social justice standards that we use in San Leandro from Teaching Tolerance. And then they developed up to 5 units per grade band that comprise 3 to 5 lessons within those units that integrate across curriculum and will dovetail nicely with project-based learning. We know that the TK5 teacher is a generalist. They're teaching also math and English language arts or Spanish language arts and art and science and all the other subjects. And so it's less likely that the history or social science lessons that an elementary teacher engages in will stand completely alone. Instead, they're often thematically woven in to the other content areas, if not into a specially designed project-based learning unit. So we believe that the custom-made units that the teachers on this committee are putting forth as the recommendation will actually be harmonious with the way that our elementary teachers approach teaching and learning in San Leandro Unified. The custom-made units also include resources, nonfiction and fiction literature that align to the essential questions and lessons, as well as reference tools, whether it's something like an atlas or an ancillary history book or workbook. They've compiled all the materials they believe will be necessary. So the recommendation put forth by the TK5 History Social Science Adoption Committee is for custom-made units. They are not going with a publisher. Here are the members of the TK5 History and Social Science Adoption Committee. And not only did they pilot materials, but they also engaged in lesson design and have committed to to the best that they can inform us on how we can sort of continue that process. For world language, the adoption committee has put forth recommendations in 3 language areas. For Mandarin, you'll see Chang Tsui for Mandarin 1 through 4, and also for Mandarin speakers, and Chairman's Bao for an AP supplemental text. Our Mandarin AP course already has a fairly new text since that program was more recently added. For Spanish, levels 1 through 3 in AP, the committee recommends Vista. For medical Spanish, a course that we have in our career pathway, they recommend McGraw-Hill. For Spanish speakers, Wayside. And they recommend some supplemental materials for Spanish speakers from Guerra and Savas. For French, the committee recommends Savas for the AP course. For French 1 to 3, we will need to bring that recommendation to the November 7th board meeting, the November board meeting, because the publisher that was chosen for French 1 to 3, we found out just honestly days before leading up to our board curriculum committee that the publisher is filing Chapter 11 and about to be bankrupt. And so it is a Houghton Mifflin, and we do not want to engage with the publisher that might not be able to provide us the services that we need for an adoption that we know could go for 5 to 8 years. Often these companies are bought out by other companies. And so with that in mind, our fearless French teacher, Ms. Gonzalez, put so much work into that recommendation, and we're going to give her some time and some space to review some other materials. We know that Vista also offers French, and she will do that for us, and we'll bring forth that recommendation shortly. Here are the adoption committee members for 612 World Language. We thank them for all their work. And our next steps, now that you see our recommendations, are, if this is approved tonight, to complete the TK5 History Social Studies curriculum. It's possible we have current adoption members that like to continue the work, and there might be others who would like to hop on to that commitment. We will begin training on the digital elements and resources as they arrive. And we'll begin to think through how to embed collaboration so that we can integrate these new adoptions into our current curriculum and assessments. You might be wondering, how much does all this cost? For TK-12, for science, it's almost $1.9 million. For history, social science, it's about 1.2. And for 6-12 world language, we're looking at about $400,000. When we have the final on the French 1-3, that number will be shored up. So in total, these 3 adoptions that will touch surely every student in San Leandro Unified School District, the total is here for you. So I'd like to conclude by thanking our adoption committee facilitators. They call themselves a starfish. Gaia Pine, Celine Liu, 2 arms of the starfish, holding down the TK-12 science, Ari Dolid and Rachel Vitania holding down TK-12 history, social science, and Sally Berry, our instructional coach who focused on 6-12 world language, all under the very strong guidance leadership of Joanne Clark, our Senior Director of Educational Services. They launched the committees, they developed the rubrics, they worked with the vendors, they held very thoughtful dialogue between the committee members in order to put forth the recommendations that are before you. And I think that when reading through the briefs, you can see the thoughtfulness in the work that they did. We also want to thank our materials and tech support folks under the leadership of Dr. Michael Kubakub, our director, Margarita Alexander, making sure that the teachers had all these instructional materials, which was very difficult during a pandemic to review things. Cindy Lau, ensuring that all the digital licenses were quickly given to teachers for the materials that they wanted to pilot. And Juliana Papuk, who made sure that the clever integration and tech integration was on point so that folks could be able to pilot things as they needed. It was no light lift. And so I want to make sure that we give them a big thank you for this work and the work that will surely emerge should this recommendation be approved tonight. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
Comments? Trustee Sheridan.
Dr. Patel, I want to thank you for the presentation. Also really appreciative of all of the reports and backup doc that were in the board packet, especially the science one, the way that that was laid out with the graphs on the votes, the comments. While I wasn't a part of the textbook adoption committee, it made it very easy to look at the notes and see all of the results in there. So I appreciate that. The question I have is regarding the TK-5 History Social Sciences custom made units. Are they going to have sufficient online access to material since they're kind of building their own?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The trade books that we're purchasing for the students, for the teachers to use as literature would obviously be, for the teacher, right, to present. But in terms of the kinds of activities the student would engage in, the readings, we're looking at online resources and open resources that can be linked in. There's the California Historical Project. There's multiple online resources that the teachers have collated in order for students to have online access to those texts. So that is something we are looking at. And we're also looking at where there are open resources, can we scan them and PDF them and make them available because the copyright allows us to do that work.
Okay.
But that is important to us as well. Yeah, we don't want them to miss out on that accessibility.
Especially now. Okay, great. Thank you.
A couple of things. First, I want to say thank you for making this a special board meeting. All of the reading we had to do leading up to this meeting was a meeting in itself. So thank you for that. And I really want to say I appreciated all the quotes and the examples that we were given of why they liked curriculum and why they didn't like the curriculum. That was very helpful in helping me understand what lens they were using as they were reviewing the materials. And then I also want to piggyback on Trustee Sheridan's question about the social studies for K-5. The cost. So we're buying some materials. Are we going to be buying more materials as they're developing these custom curriculums for each grade level? Is there more costs that will be coming as they figure out exactly what they're doing?
Well, we're working within the cost structure that we had for a traditional sort of big box adoption. The teachers they've worked really hard, first off, to collate to the best of their ability, right? The kinds of books that would be needed for each unit within each grade band. And what we've done is we've reached out to Lee and Low Books. They're a publisher that has incorporated a lot of the smaller multicultural publishing companies like Shen Books, Pinata, pretty amazing publishing company, minority owned in New York, that has lots of text sets around diverse text collection. And we're having them review the book list to see where things could be like modernized or suggestions could be made back to the committee so that we can do all the purchasing from one company and not a company like Follett, because the committee didn't go with the big box company. They went with a very specific lens in mind around the rubric that they built. And so we're trying to honor that by finding the right publisher match. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do that all up front before December. Will there be ongoing work? Yes, right? And so we definitely are looking and budgeting for the kind of teacher time and support staff time that will need to be compensated for just to honor their continued work and guidance around creating the curriculum in a way where it'll live on a TK5 social studies website. So everything will be linked and ready and accessible. And then also we'll be doing some printing and binding of things that might be available online, but the teachers want to be able to have like a nice hard copy and the wraparound. And we might need to make some class sets for when we are in person. So all that work is happening in the backdrop now.
So my other concern is not having a textbook to go home, is that a lot of parents learned the elementary social studies information maybe incorrectly or differently than how we're teaching it now. And so what supports will there be for the students to go home and help educate their families to the different way of looking at the things that they're looking at now?
Yeah, so how do we make what students are learning visible for families, right?
Exactly.
So that it's educative for them and that they can also participate alongside their child. I think what's important to know in San Leandro is now that since March 13th, it's clear we have a take-home technology program. I don't see it going backward. Our Chief Technology Officer, Larry Simon, is planning that even when we have a return that's completely in person, we will always have a take-home program so that students have access to the text. We've invested in online tools like Read Write Text Help, where things can be read aloud, and there are adaptations for our students who are more diverse learners. To be able to access the text. And so it'll be online, but it'll be via their Chromebook instead of the textbook. We're not sure how much students take home the social studies textbook as it is, because our current program K2 didn't have a textbook. It was kind of like small flyers that look like Scholastic book orders that were seasonal and so, or kind of topical. So
okay. And then my last question is, when are these textbooks expected to arrive? So we're purchasing them, and when do they land in our district? And how are they going to be integrated into it this year, or wait till next year?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's start with world language. For world language, all the ordering, should the board approve the adoptions tonight, we are ready to order on Wednesday, October 28th. The Materials Center, Michael and Joanne, along with their team, have been doing lots and lots of counts. And so much of this curriculum has digital licenses. And so the people that are on the committee have already been using it, and they kind of want to continue for the year. And so it'll be about just extending their digital license. And then as soon as the paper-based materials arrive, getting it to their classroom. The companies say they can get it to us. We know that the funding needs to be expensed by the end of December, but we also know that there are there's some leniency coming from the state of California because of COVID-related shipping delays. So as long as we have our order in, we think they'll ship to us within 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, but we also don't know. All bets are off because of the COVID shipping delays and the Thanksgiving break and the 2-week break around the end of winter or December. For history, social studies, the digital licenses will be on immediately. We're going to work with our publishers again to make sure the digital licenses go on immediately for 6/12. And then the paper-based materials, again, 4 to 8 weeks. We know that especially for secondary, that the teachers are eager to get the materials and sort of get going, because that is a subject that they teach all day. For elementary, the science, the licenses will be on. There are big science kits that come that are shared in grades K-3, and then more individual for 4-5. Those might take a while to arrive and to be cataloged and marked in a way that we can get them in to teachers. So there might be a little bit more of a delay on that. And then, as we know with TK5 social studies, we're hoping to get all the literature ordered and arriving around January, February, but we might wait, since the elementary teachers will already have new science curriculum, to have that curriculum maybe stored, and then when things are a little bit more settled, hopefully in person, delivered maybe May, June, so teachers can use it for planning into the fall.
Okay. Thank you, and thank to all the staff, all the teachers, everyone that made this happen, and with such a short time frame. So thank you so much.
And I just want to say, because I do see a comment about the technology program. When we talk about having a digital resources, we are looking at class sets of books in the classroom as well. But when we do have a take-home program, we always make sure that there's access to a device still in the classroom, right? That there's like a class set that's in the classroom. And so that's the kind of ordering we've been doing, because you can't always ensure that the student will be able to bring it back and forth. And we know for Williams that that's on our mind, to make sure that whatever route we take, the student always has access to the curriculum.
Trustee Perola, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think she answered all my questions, so I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mackenzie, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. So thank you to all the teachers that did this. I know all my teachers were super excited to like get new textbooks and get all of this like happening. So I'm really proud of everybody for getting this done so quickly too, because I know this money had to get spent by December. And then my only question is for, I guess, all grades that are going to have an online version of the textbook or online like curriculum that goes along. How are we going to make sure that the teachers who weren't using it already learn and kind of know how to use the technology going forward?
Yeah, that'll be part of our training. And knowing that this year we have the benefit of kind of having an extra half year where teachers can sort of, if they wanted to continue doing what they're doing, and then right in the training space, start to look at what's new. But in the past, when we've had new TK-12 adoptions for math or English language arts, we have lots of training, whether it happens during the day or after school or during the summer, and one-on-one coaching to make sure that folks are able to use it. Our history and science departments are, they're fairly, we're not huge, right? We have one high school and one continuation high school. So we feel like, and 2 middle schools. So we feel like we can wrap our arms around those teachers to help them figure out the pathway for them to be able to be ready for use starting September 2021.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because I know some teachers, are a lot better at technology and other ones like are having some difficulty. And I just want to make sure that across the board, everybody is getting to use the online versions, because I know there's so much more that could be done when we're getting these new texts. So,
yeah, and absolutely, you're right, Trustee, because the support that we provide is going to actually, like, we can buy everything, but if we're not giving our teachers and support staff the support to learn how to use it and to learn how to use it at their pace in the way they like to learn, then it's actually not going to be implemented and students aren't going to benefit. So that's on our mind. Right now, we have a nice technology education consultant committee, a group of teachers who are helping each other with technology. So I think there's a lot to learn from that group about how they're supporting folks and how folks are learning technology, so that we can use what we learned from there in rolling out the digital components of the new adoptions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Thank you. My question is around the integration with our portals that we're using currently for students and parents. Typically, when you do something like this, there's some glitches with links or PDFs not working, things like that. And I just wanted to make sure that we already heard that some parents were having problems not seeing what their kids' late assignments are and things like that. I just want to make sure that we keep in mind, or that we're not making it more difficult for them to do those things, along with the systems that we bring on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so I think for us, there'll be two things. One is making sure that the students have easy access to either clever integration or the curriculum, even as possible, being able to be downloaded and preloaded onto the Chromebook for that grade. So that, you know, it's already kind of there. And so depending on the company, you can see we're working with not just one or two publishers, but quite a handful of publishers when you count all the different ones for the different languages and adoptions and special curriculums for the specialized programs. We'll be working to see either are they integrating with Clever, is it downloadable for us? And then we'll you know, be working to create like maybe like a master set of each text that's available on a website so that it's very clear where you can go. Because access to the student text is usually pretty open. Which is what families need to rely on. It's the teacher materials that can be a little bit more copyrighted and harder to make accessible. So yeah.
Then I also just wanted to give everybody mad props. I saw the list of teachers that worked on all this and a lot of heavy hitters. So congratulations to everyone for all the hard work and putting it all together like this.
Trustee Tate.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. I did see the presentation or the committee members in our curriculum and policy committee meeting. And I just wanted to really acknowledge the hard work that was involved in this. I don't think I really acknowledged how big of a deal this is to adopt a curriculum. Until this particular meeting. You know, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the time it took, how old our curriculum was that was being used. And I think I just wasn't at the forefront of my thinking, you know. And so another thing that I really wanted to mention, and I wanted to mention it at our meeting, but someone else had mentioned it, but this is even better to mention it at this special board meeting, is the collaboration between the high school and Lincoln. I think that's so important to include Lincoln into anything that's a major concern, anything that we're incorporating into our study. You know, Lincoln is not a subpar high school. It has a phenomenal program, and so many of our students that go to Lincoln, they end up being really successful as a result of choosing the alternative high school. So I'm just really proud of the collaboration, that they were not left out, but they were a part of this process. So thank you for everybody involved. And I can't wait to see how well our students thrive as a result of this new curriculum. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that was shared with you all about the board curriculum committee about the Mr. Scott Gordon, Mary Dia Angostino, Joseph Chapdelaine, having their voice is essential. And in our ELA and also in our math adoptions, we always have representation from Lincoln. So it's just, it's mandatory for us that all the schools are represented, as definitely for secondary and as much as possible with elementary.
Trustee Aguilar.
Ditto with what everybody said. I think one of the other things that we were able to do in the policy and curriculum committee was actually talk to the committee members and, you know, get to understand how they felt. And man, they're passionate about this. And like Trustee Tate was saying, is I really didn't understand the gravity of this work until it came to us. And it's amazing to see the process play out. And like Trustee Gonzalez was saying earlier, it was like a meeting in reading everything all together, but it's all really great stuff. And I think it's really innovative. I haven't seen too much of it, but having sections especially built within our district, that's just amazing. And for everything else, just so much great work. I know it's hard sometimes to keep a smile on your face in our conditions, but they had smiles. I know we smiled, and it was really exciting, and it still is. It's awesome, and I'm happy that we had a special board meeting on this specifically.
Thank you. I'll be last with just a couple of comments. Thank you, Dr. Patel, for your presentation. I really appreciate all your hard work and effort you put into this. Thank you to all the committee members. I think they did an outstanding job in such a short period of time. One takeaway from me when I was reading through the materials, there was one teacher who was opposed, I believe it was to the science curriculum, but they said, however, I'm willing to go along with that. And that made me feel good that we've created the type of culture where somebody can feel they can speak up and say, hey, I don't totally agree with this, but yet I'm so comfortable with my team that I want to be on board with this. So that was really great. I appreciate the feedback from the committee members about making changes to the curriculum, such as adding notes to it, which I think is really good. Not taking somebody else's material, but taking that material and making your own. So it's a great ownership there. And lastly, excuse me, this is probably the most money I've seen spent on textbooks in a long time. And I think that's a really great thing. So great job, everyone.